business. But what I think really hurts small businesses in this country is that they don't get the unfair advantage of hiring a lobbyist in Congress.
Correct.
And they don't get to, fund a campaign their whole season. So what I'd like to know is, what would you do to advance specific reforms to end the corrupting influence of money in politics?
Well, a couple points that you raised. Number one, I believe that people buy into your agenda. That's what I say. When I run for office, I tell people what I stand for. And when you hear what I stand for, if you want to support me and donate to our campaign, assuming you're not, a really, really bad person or somebody like that, we accept that. And vice versa. People buy into my agenda. I don't buy into theirs. Never have and never will. Here's my second point, and you raised it. It's an important point. This is why big government is so damaging. Because the bigger the government, the more the government controls the economy, the more the people who have influence on government win. So let me give you a graphic example of it, okay? And then I'll use a real-life example with you. A graphic example of it is that oftentimes you will find in government that an established industry will use the influence it has on government to create requirements that a smaller business or a competitor could never meet. And the result is they want to limit competition. So an excellent example of it now is two. There's two. One is, think about the regulations on banking. All these regulations were passed to take on the big banks. Today, the big banks are bigger than ever. And the small banks have vanished. Why? Because only the big banks can live up to these regulations. Only they can hire 1,000 people to work in their offices to comply with all these things. The small banks can't. So guess what? When the big bank comes calling and says, we want to buy you, they sell, or they just go out of business. Let me give you a real-world example. This happened, and I talk about it in my book. I teach a course, I'm on leave now, but at Florida International University. And I overheard some students complaining they couldn't find Uber, the car service. They had just come from somewhere else. They didn't have it in Miami. And I pounced. I said, you know why you can't find Uber in Miami? It's because of big government. Because an established industry, in this case, the taxi cab medallion owners, had not used their influence over local government to ensure that Uber can't operate here. So imagine for a moment, 20 years ago, if Blockbuster Video, remember them? Yeah. If Blockbuster Video had been successful at convincing Congress to pass a law, and the law would say this: if you want to rent a movie in America, you must do it from a physical store where you show your ID. Well, that would be great for their business model. They'd still be in business. And their argument would be is we want to prevent kids from renting rated R movies. You know what never would have happened? Netflix would have never existed. Now this sounds far-fetched to you. Well, there's a bunch of people that used to work at Blockbuster that are probably kicking themselves right now that they didn't pass that law. It happens all the time. I saw it at the state level. I see it at the federal level. It is the reason why in countries where the government dominates the economy, it's the same families and the same businesses that dominate decade after decade. Only in places where government is limited can someone who is an employee quit their job, take their life savings, and open up competition for their former employer, and one day potentially put the other person out of business because they're better at it. That's why limited government is so important in helping empower. The bigger the government is, the more those who can influence government have influence. Our last question right here.